Hey, what's up, guys? I got an itch here. That was good. Hey, what's up, guys? Joker here. Today we are going to be taking a look at my new test system that I'm going to be using from here on out on the channel when it comes to testing new graphics cards and games coming out. This is an updated version of my Frame Raider build, which I featured a couple of years ago on the channel. It had an i7 7700K, and it ran very stable, very well for me at 5 gigahertz over the last 2 years, but it's time for a change as we've got the new Intel i9 9900K is now available. You've probably already seen my review on it by this point in time, but if not, I'll have a card linked up below if you want to go back and check that out, or the benchmarking video where I compared this up against the 2700X. So yeah, we've got the i9 9900K in here. And also, before we get into any more of the hardware, I want to quickly thank Be Quiet for sponsoring this video and supplying all of the hardware that I needed to kind of complete this build. The case, the power supply, the cooler. They've been really great working with the channel. So for this, we are using the Be Quiet Silent Base 801. It's one of their newest chassis. It just came out in like the last month or two, and it's a really nice mid-tower chassis here that I'm using here for this system. It's got a lot of room in there to be able to work on it, and one of the things that I like about it, especially since this is a test system and I'm going to be changing hardware on it somewhat frequently, mostly just graphics cards, possibly CPU coolers as well if you want to get into testing with those in the near future as well, is that the side panel pops off completely toolless. There's just like an ejector button on the back side of the case here, and even though it's using a tempered glass side panel, I don't have to worry about undoing all the different screws and taking it on and off or getting fingerprints all over it. I just hit the ejector button, it pops right off and goes right back on just as easy. So that's something I really like seeing on cases that are using tempered glass. It's taken a few years for them to kind of get caught up with the way that they have them mounted and the way you take them on and off. But there's a few chassis that are doing something, you know, that are at least something like this now. But yeah, I like the implementation here from Be Quiet, and that's used on both sides of the chassis, for the back side as well as the tempered glass side panel. So I mentioned we're running the i9 9900K in here, and I was actually able to get it overclocked here in this system up to 5 gigahertz at 1.37 volts. And because of this processor and the way that it is, it does certainly get quite toasty, even with the Be Quiet Dark Rock 4 on here, which is rated for up to a 200 watt TDP, and the 9900K is a 95 watt TDP part. However, it does exceed that when you start getting into things like overclocking and adjusting the voltage and all of that. But the 200 watt TDP should still be more than enough to be able to cool it, although this processor just runs really hot from Intel. So this thing can get up to like 80 to 90 degrees Celsius when I'm putting it under like a full load, like if I was rendering out a video or just running it on an IDA64 for whatever reason. It can get quite toasty, but in normal gaming scenarios, the Be Quiet Dark Rock 4 holds up really well, as it's an exceptional cooler, very quiet and all of that. And I've used it in a couple of systems now here on the channel, and I honestly have no complaints about it. I was even using it in my 2700X system that I used for my original benchmarking up against this, which was also in a nearly identical case, the Dark Base 700. So it was almost identical systems, which is something I wanted to do, is I like using complete builds when it comes to testing new hardware or any hardware really on the channel. I'm not a big fan of using open air test beds, as I don't really think it delivers a real world scenario to what someone might actually be using for their system. For the motherboard on here, I was using the Asus Prime Z390P, which is definitely one of the more budget-oriented motherboards on the Z390 platform. I actually picked this up myself just last Thursday after I was having some unfortunate motherboard issues with the first board that I had been sent by EVGA, the Z390 for the Win board. I had some issues with that board, and I'm still uncertain whether it was a dead-on-arrival board or if it was a driver incompatibility or something. I'm still waiting to get a replacement board from EVGA, so until I can get one of those in, or another board on the channel, this is what I'm going to be using for now. But it's really been rock solid, even though this is a $150 motherboard, and it definitely lacks a lot of the features of some of the other really high-end boards like the MSI Godlike motherboard, which I would definitely love to try out in this system, and kind of, or one of the higher-end EVGA boards, their Maximus boards, something like that. I think it would be really interesting to kind of take a budget board like this, $150 board, and put it up against one of those $300, $400, $500 motherboards that you can find out there with all the other features, and see if it makes a difference in terms of overclocking capability, temperatures, anything like that. So I think that would be an interesting video to do in the future. Let me know down in the comments below if that's something you want to see. But overall, I really didn't have any issues with using this board. As I said, I was able to hit 5 gigahertz, and I did have some temperature issues. So I probably won't push it past 5 gigahertz until maybe we put a water cooler on here in the future. We can kind of test that out. I do have a 360 millimeter fractal design AIO upstairs, which I might try out in this system and see if we can maybe push that 5 gigahertz a little bit further, because with how hot these processors run, air coolers are just kind of doing the job. But I think for really serious overclocking, if you're pushing the voltage up past 1.37, which I'm already at right now, you're probably going to want to look at using a liquid all-in-one cooler. I'm actually still using the same RAM from my previous test system. It's G.Skill Trident Z RAM, which runs at 3200 megahertz, so pretty fast RAM. There are definitely other kits out there that are faster than my 3200 megahertz kit, but it definitely does the job, and it's a really nice looking kit of RAM, and it kind of matches along with the color theme of the build, which is meant to be silver and black, as it's Raider, and I'm a huge Raiders fan, so that's kind of why I called it Frame Raider to begin with, and this is Frame Raider 2.0, so trying to stick with the whole silver and black aesthetic. You'll probably notice that right now I am running a GeForce RTX 2080 Ti because it's just the most powerful graphics card you can currently own, but this is certainly one piece that will be changing quite frequently. I mean, as soon as a new game comes out, I'm probably going to be running like 7 or 8 different graphics cards through this build, testing out any new games that come out. But I just kind of wanted to try it out in this system. You already saw the performance numbers in my original review on the 9900K, and it's quite a beastly pairing. And it's, if you're picking up something like the 9900K for gaming, you might conceivably pick up something like the 2080 Ti and pair up a $1,200 graphics card with a $600 CPU, which is just insanely expensive. I mean, with that, and then the motherboard, even here, with the budget motherboard, you're looking at almost $2,000 right there alone, just on the graphics card, CPU, and motherboard, and that's before getting into the RAM, the cooler, the SSDs, anything like that, power supply, case. It's, you know, this is definitely a high-end, expensive system. I mean, all in all, with everything in here, we're probably looking at somewhere north of $3,000, which is probably the most expensive PC I've ever built on the channel, I think. You can see on the bottom here, we do have a full-length power supply shroud, which I was really happy to see on my previous Frame Raider build, my other test system. I was using the Dark Base 900, also a Be Quiet chassis, which did not have a full-length power supply shroud. So I actually had one custom made by Hassan over at V1 Tech, which I really loved. It had my channel logo, Joker Productions, in silver, etched into the side, which was really awesome. I'm going to be holding on to it as a memento, but yeah, for this one, we've already got a power supply shroud included, and it actually, the top covers on it can actually even be removed. One of them I had to leave removed because of the way that I routed the SATA cables to this motherboard, because they're on the bottom rather than on the side, which was kind of weird. Didn't really like the placement of those on the motherboard, so I ended up, having to route the cables through the bottom. I probably could do them through the side, but I think it wouldn't have looked as clean. I don't know. I might go back and change it at some point in the near future. Right now, I'm pretty happy with how the system looks and performs overall. But behind that power supply shroud is the Be Quiet Straight Power 11 1000 watt PSU, another part that they provided out for this. This is an 80 plus gold rated, fully modular power supply, so it's definitely going to be able to do the job for any graphics card configuration that we throw in here. Even if some point down the road we wanted to do SLI testing, if I can get my hands on another RTX 2080 Ti, that's something I would definitely like to do, but I don't have two 2080 Ti's or two 2080s or anything like that right now, so it's not something I'm going to be doing, but it's good to know that we've got the 1000 watt power supply here ready to go, and I definitely like the fact that it's fully modular, so we can kind of keep the cable management all tidy. And let me know in the comments what you think of the cable management here in the system. I think it looks clean AF, but that's just me, and I built it, so of course I'm going to be a little bit impartial. Speaking of cable management, I'll give you guys a quick look at the back side of the case here. I think we did a pretty good job. I usually don't go too crazy when it comes to cable managing the back side of the case because it's something you're never ever going to see. You can see that I do have two SSDs installed in there, but there is another place where you can actually do a third rear-mounted SSD, and of course you've got there's a hard drive cage that can go in the basement of the case that holds two hard drives, as well as you can populate all of the other ones on the inside of the case as well. if you wanted to, but I left those out just to kind of keep the system looking clean. And I'm going to be running this build only on a couple of SSDs anyway, since all it really needs to hold is the operating system and all of my games that I want to use for benchmarking. So I've got a 500 gigabyte Samsung 850 EVO in there. That's just really for the boot drive and for recording gameplay footage. And then the other SSD is a SanDisk 960 gigabyte drive. These things are actually really cheap. I'll leave a link down below in the description if you want to pick one up over on Amazon, as well to all the other hardware that you're seeing here in this video. But I can definitely highly recommend these SanDisk drives, as I've talked about these in a couple of videos in the past, because they're not the most blazing fast solid state drive, but if you're just wanting to pick up a 1 terabyte drive to hold all of your games and be able to load them quickly, then you really can't go wrong with something like this. And you're not going to need like the most insane 1.2 terabyte PCIe SSD just to load your games off of anyway. I mean, those things are nice to have if you're really going to leverage the power of it. But when it comes to just loading your games, you really don't need to have something that insanely fast. And I didn't include an M.2 drive in the system because I just didn't have a spare one laying around. I've got them all on systems right now. So this is, the hardware configuration that I went with, and the 2 solid state drives is more than enough room. I think I still have like 400 gigabytes spare on the 1 terabyte drive, and then the 500 gigabyte drive barely has anything on it whatsoever. So that's still got like over 400 gigabytes of space available for me to use. But I think that's going to wrap it up here for FrameRaider 2.0. Be on the lookout for this system, as it's going to be featured in a lot of videos in the future whenever we're testing new graphics cards and games, as I mentioned. And yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments below on the build, anything maybe that you would have done differently. If you enjoyed this build overview, don't forget to stick a thumbs up on it down below and subscribe if you're not already. And as I said, if you want links to any of the hardware that I'm using in this system, or you just want to see the parts list, I'll have that linked down in the description below with all the links over to Amazon, which are affiliate links, so I do get a small kickback if you pick up any of those. And I think a few of these parts, like the Be Quiet parts, I think particular, usually you'll find those over on Newegg primarily. They don't really usually hit Amazon as much, the Be Quiet parts, but I'll definitely have links to those over on Newegg as well, mixed in with the parts list wherever we can find them, and the other parts wherever we can get really the best deal on them, whatever e-tailer you happen to be picking them up at. So as I said, I'm going to get out of here, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another video. Goodbye for now. Tara.